warm and the sun was shining, and I almost went swimming one day.
Danielle and her school friends were divided into small groups to test their survival skills. They had little food and only basic camping equipment. They had no means of contact with the outside world.
We slept under plastic sheets that we held up with ropes, not real tents. They were no doors, no windows, nothing that really kept out anything but rain.
When snow began to fall, they still weren't aware of the danger.
The snow was beautiful. It was this tiniest little flakes that you'd ever want to see, and they fell down so fast. And I've never seen the ground covered so quickly in my entire life. These tiny little flakes.
As blizzard conditions developed, they made camp on the mountain.
When it was snowing Friday night, the tarps sagged, so they were about 2 inches from our face. It was like we were suffocating.
Record snow fell throughout the Appalachians that night. On Mount LeConte, it measured 5 feet. With wind chill, the temperature was 30 below. By daybreak, the students from Michigan realized they were even worse off than they had feared.
When we woke up the next day, we couldn't find our backpacks. We knew where we put them, but the snow had covered them up so much that we couldn't find them at all.
The teenagers were no longer thinking clearly. In a blind panic, they tried to escape the wilderness. They had no way of knowing that the entire park was now cut off.
While we were running down the mountain, it was almost pure survival mode. Everybody was panicking. I was scared to death.
But there was no shelter for Danielle. In the blizzard, she and her teacher, James Woodruff, fell behind the others in their group.
I had taken one boot off, and I couldn't get the other one off. It was stuck. In the morning, the boot that I had gotten off had frozen, and I couldn't get it back on. Mr. Woodruff, he was doing really badly, and he said that he would go on and he would get the rest of the group, and they would bring back some fuel, and we'd start the stove, and we'd just heat up my boot, and then we'd go on together. I couldn't stop him. I let him go.
He walked only a short distance, out of sight of Danielle, before he collapsed, unconscious, in the snow. It was now nearly 2 days since the storm had begun. Danielle lay all alone without shelter. By the end of the weekend, the Army and National Guard could finally launch what would become the largest peacetime search and rescue mission in U.S. history. Once airborne, Army Medical Officer Sergeant Brian Fall had a bird's-eye view of the havoc left in the storm's wake.
When I got up there, I was like, boy, what a mess. And I would say from a foot to 15-foot snow drifts, how the trees were just buckled, and how just everything was just chaos. It was a mess.
Within hours, most of the teenagers from Michigan had been rescued. They had stayed in groups and were quickly spotted from the air. But Danielle and her teacher were alone. Time was running out.
I started to hear helicopters all that morning. I think it was around noon that I finally saw one come up from the bottom of the valley. I saw Brian come down on the winch. And I don't really remember anything about it.
Sergeant Fall realized immediately that Danielle was close to death.
I got on board and told the pilot, let's just go. We need to get to the hospital as soon and as fast as we can, because I knew her time was limited. 45 minutes, that's my best guess.
After a weekend stranded in the snow, 15-year-old Danielle Swank is recovering from frostbite and exposure.
My right foot is, the toes are very purple, or pretty purple. And the doctor said that I'm probably going to lose part of my toes on the right foot, but everything else. And maybe some of the nerves in my hands and my both feet.
Danielle's story begins after she and teacher, Mr. Woodruff, became separated from the rest of their group. They pushed their way through waist-deep snow and through icy creeks.
My boots, which I had gotten one off the night before, but the other one was just so frozen on I couldn't get off. Mr. Woodruff couldn't get either of his off the night before, but the one I did get off, I couldn't get back on in the morning.
Unable to feel his feet and with blisters on his hands, Danielle said Mr. Woodruff left to find help and the rest of the group. She was concerned when he didn't come back.
I figured that our group just might have been farther away than we anticipated, and that he couldn't make it back. So I spent that night by myself. It was kind of scary. I cried I cried like a bunch, but I got through it.
What Danielle didn't know was that Mr. Woodruff had only made it a half a mile away before falling unconscious. He never reached the rest of the group. But later that afternoon, both were rescued.
I saw Army helicopter, and I was like waving to that. I was like, and yelling help, but, and they circled past overhead, and I didn't think they saw me. It was a very scary moment.
Danielle escaped with her life, but will bear the scars of her experience forever. Frostbite claimed several of her toes. Her teacher, who was found with his feet encased in ice, lost all his fingers and toes. This storm was the biggest that has ever been recorded in the United States. The clouds it generated covered 2,000 miles. Records for snowfall, wind speed, and low temperatures were being broken from Florida to New York.